Well, after disagreements in the Arab Joint List Party led to a split, Arab-Israeli voter turnout is becoming of uttermost importance to Arab representation in the Knesset. But on top of the split, having to vote in a fourth election in 2 years, likely ending in political deadlock, was discouraging, to say the least. Some candidates and their supporters predicted ahead of the election that the percentage of the vote in the Arab community would be less than 50%, compared to 65% in the last round. Now let's find out exactly what the numbers are telling us. Dr. Arik Rudnitzkey from the Israel Democracy Institute is a research expert on Arab society in Israel. Thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure.
So Arik, first, tell me about the voter turnout. What were the numbers this year compared to last year? And if there was a change, why did that change occur?
Well, eventually it did change. As of now, according to the current figures that I have, turnout in the Arab sector reached a historic low of 45%. But still, they are still counting the double envelopes. And all in all, we are expected to have the same turnout as we witnessed just 2 years ago in April 19. Well, this is actually, the situation is similar to what happened 2 years ago when the joint list split it into two different lists. And the public reaction was similar to that, what we saw just 2 years ago.
So is this split within the Arab Joint List parties dividing or uniting Arab-Israeli society? What effect is it having?
Well, the big issue here, the big story here is that there are two kingmakers in Israel. One is Shas and the other is Abbas, referring to the United Arab List headed by Dr. Mansour Abbas, which is actually a political party representing the Islamic movement in Israel. And this is the real story here. Abbas presented throughout the electoral campaign, presented himself as the future kingmaker, and he was right. They did manage to pass the electoral threshold. And although all in all, Arab parties suffered from a significant decrease in the representation, they were represented by as high of 15 seats in the past Knesset, and now they are expected to win only 10 seats. But the political role that the United Arab List is expected to play will be indeed significant if should Netanyahu form a future government relying on the votes of the United Arab List.
Well, we've heard some of the far-right politicians say actually they would not sit in a coalition with Abbas. Is it possible that he will sit with Netanyahu in the end? And what sort of effect would that have on Israeli politics and the dynamic of the government?
This is expected to be the change, the real change in politics, not just in the Arab society, but in Israel at large. If eventually Netanyahu will form a government relying on the support of an Arab party, even though it will be outside of the coalition, I think the chances are quite high. Throughout the electoral campaign, Abbas and his party tried to diminish or somehow obscure the nationalistic issues or religious issues, and they were focusing on promoting the interest of the Arab public, especially in light of the past year when Arab society suffered a significant deteriorating social and economic status due to the coronavirus pandemic, and also burning issues such as crime and violence and construction that really preoccupy the agenda of the Arab public. So in this sense, the chances of a future cooperation are quite high, quite significant. I think that the real issue here is whether Netanyahu's partners from the right-wing parties will be actually ready to have such kind of a cooperation with an Arab party. If this will be the case, this will be certainly a historic landmark in Arab politics and Israeli politics at large.
Well, we'll have to wait just a little bit longer to see. Dr. Rudnitzkey, thank you so much for joining me today.